turn our Bibles this evening to Romans. I think we'll finish at the end of Romans chapter 3. We'll start there. Romans chapter 3 and verse 30. And then we'll go into chapter 4. All right. Romans 3 and verse 30. Seeing it is one God, which shall justify the circumcision by faith and uncircumcision through faith, do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law. What shall we say then that Abraham our father, as pertaining to the flesh, hath found? For if Abraham were justified by works, he hath whereof to glory, but not before God. For what saith the Scripture? Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Now to him that worketh is a reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. But to him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. Even as David also describeth the blessedness of the man unto whom God imputeth righteousness without works, saying, Blessed are they whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin. Cometh this blessedness then upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. And he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith, which he had, yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of them all that believe, though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. We'll stop right there. The Apostle Paul has made it clear that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. 3 verse 28 says, Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. He provides 3 reasons why the principle of justification does not invalidate the law. In verse 27, he says, it omits any ground of boasting. Okay? So we see that this justification by faith says you have nothing to brag about. You have nothing to boast in because you haven't done anything to gain it or earn it. Verse 29, he says, Is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also. So he says the same God established both. And then in verse 31, he reminds us that Christ fulfilled the law. He did not destroy it. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17, Jesus says, Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So when he says he's not come to destroy the law or the prophets, he says he's talking about the written word that they have. The law, the first 5 books, and then the prophetical books. He says, I'm not coming to throw away all that. I'm coming to fulfill it. I'm coming to fulfill all that the law states, all that the prophets have declared. I've come to fulfill that. So these are 3 reasons why the principle of justification doesn't invalidate the law. Paul then goes on to state clearly that man's a sinner and God provides a righteousness for sinners. And it must be appropriated by a faith in Jesus Christ. In chapter 4, what he does, he illustrates the principle of justification by faith with 2 Old Testament characters, Abraham and David. These 2 men were held in as high esteem as any other 2 men in Scripture. Abraham was the founder of the Hebrew people, Father Abraham. You know it. Father Abraham had many sons, and I am one of them. Maybe we should just sing it, Father Abraham. No, we won't do that. But Father Abraham, we see him as the one that the nations of the world are blessed in. We see him as the Jewish people see him as their founder and father. Christianity, we look back to Abraham as the father of the faithful. Even Islam looks back to Abraham and says he's our father. So the nations of the world are blessed through Jesus Christ. Now, so we see that Abraham was the father of many nations, no doubt. But David was their greatest king. So Paul uses these two examples. He uses these two men to show the agreement between law and grace. Faith was God's sole requirement under the law and before the law. Okay? So, Abraham. He begins with a tremendous question. What shall we say then that Abraham our father has pertaining to the flesh hath found? What has Abraham found out according to the flesh? What does he know about himself according to the flesh? And he found that his works according to the flesh did not produce boasting, but shame and confusion. Right? Now, we know Abraham is the father of the faithful. But we also have some indication when Abraham failed to continue his walk by faith. Remember when he went before Pharaoh and he says to Sarah, look, will you just tell him that you're my sister? Just tell me you're my sister, because if they see that you're my wife, they're going to see your beauty. He was a pretty slick talker, I'm telling you. He said, they'll see your beauty and they will just kill me. So he said, just tell them you're my sister. Oh, I'm sure that went over well, but she went along with it. But and he thought he could work it out better than God could. There's another time after God told him that Sarah would be the father of the chosen people. After he already said Sarah's going to be the one, not Hagar, but Sarah didn't do anything here. And God says, I know. I kept you from sin because of Abraham. So Abraham knows that when he walks in accordance with the flesh, when he operates in accordance with the flesh, he doesn't have anything to boast about. He knows that it's all about shame and confusion and not trusting God that has called him to be what he wants. So what do we know? He found that his works according to the flesh did not produce boasting, but shame and confusion. He was a great man of faith. But when he operated according to the flesh, he failed God. That was the assumption that they were living on. Abraham did have many good works, did a lot of good things, but they were not the basis of his salvation. Without works, and James says faith with works. Well, they're not contradicting each other. I want to show you something here. These works, what Abraham did when he took Isaac up and bound him and laid him on that altar, this was not works under the law. The law had not been given yet. So they couldn't be works of the law. Are you with me? Okay. These works are not works of the flesh because the law wasn't given yet. These were works of faith. It's interesting to me that though people say they contradict each other, they both quote the same verse. James, in chapter 2, in verse 23, he says this. The scripture was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Okay? That is Genesis 15:6. The Apostle Paul quotes the same verse in chapter 4 of Romans, verse 3. For what saith the scripture? Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Well, there you go. Seems to me that they've come together on this thing. They both have this understanding that if you have faith, James says, if you believe, if you have faith, you're going to do something to honor God. But you don't have to do things to earn your salvation. Abraham says, Paul says about Abraham, look, we see that righteousness was imputed to him not because of his works, but because of his faith. Abraham was not rewarded or given wages for his work, but received salvation on the basis of unmerited favor. Chapter 4 and verse 4 says, let's go to Romans. Yeah, let's get to the right one. All right, so Romans 4:4. No, now to him that worketh is a reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. But to him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. So we see that Abraham was not rewarded or given wages for his work, but he received salvation on